Today we're going to talk about decimals. When adding or subtracting decimals, you must stack the decimal place on top of each other. When I go to add 5.21 and 3.16, I need to put one on top of the other, perfectly in line. So I'm going to write 5.21 plus 3.16. Notice how the decimals in line, the tenths places are in line, and the hundredths places are in line. Now we simply add them up. 1 plus 6, 7, 2 plus 1, 3. Bring your decimal place straight down, and 5 plus 3 gives you 8. Moving down, I have 1.5 plus 0.27. We'll put the 1.5 on top. The 0.27, I have to line up my decimal places, which means we're going to have the 2, the 7 there, the 0 goes there. Now to fill it out, I'm going to put a trailing 0 after the 5. My plus sign, bring it across, 0 plus 7, 7, 5 plus 2, 7. Bring your decimal straight down, and 1 plus nothing is 1. Negative 3.41 plus 2.5. And again, we're going to have to line up the decimal points. If we remember from before, different signs means taking away, and the bigger number, in this case 3.14, keeps his sign. So we know that the answer is going to be negative. So we're just going to write a negative sign off to the side so that we know that our answer is going to be negative. Then I'm going to stack it, and I'm going to put the bigger number on top to make my life easier. 3.41, we know it's a subtraction problem, so taking away 2.5. Now I'm going to fill in the missing part. So 1 take away 0 is still 1. 4 take away 5. I can't do that, so that means I have to borrow. So I'm going to come over to the 3, cancel him out, make him a 2 now because I'm borrowing 1 from him, and now I have a 14. 14 take away 5 is 9. My decimal point comes straight down, and 2 take away 2 is 0. Now if you remember from the beginning, we wrote the negative sign there on purpose, so we'd remember our answer is negative 0.91. If we have two negatives, we're basically adding them up, but the answer is going to be negative. So that gives us negative 5.39 take away 3.21. Because the signs are the same, we add but keep the sign. So I have 9 plus 1 is 10. I write the 0 down here, and I carry my 1. Now I have 1 plus 3 plus 2, and that gives me 6. Bring your decimal place straight down. 5 plus 3 is 8, and we're keeping that sign. So our answer is negative 8.60. When multiplying decimals, stack them on top of each other and multiply. Remember that your answers will have the same amount of decimal places as the two numbers you multiplied together in total. As a quick review, positive times positive is a positive, positive times negative is a negative, and negative times negative is a positive. Easy way to remember that. Negative times negative, it takes two lines to create a plus sign. So negative times negative gives you that plus sign. So if we go to our first problem, 5.21 times 3.16. I like to put the larger number on top, so I'm going to put him on top. 5.21 times 3.16. And multiply like you normally would. First you multiply straight up. 6 times 1 is 6, and you work your way across. Next, I multiply 6 times 2. 6 times 2 is 12. Write the 2, carry the 1, and lastly, I multiply the 6 times the 5. 6 times 5 is 30, plus that extra 1 is 31. I'm finished with the 6. Some people like to cross it out, which is perfectly fine. Goodbye 6, but you always have to remember your placeholder. For a placeholder, I put a 0. And then I do it all over again, this time with the 1. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 5 is 5. Now I'm finished with the 1, so I put 2 placeholders and do it all over again. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 5 is 15. Our last step is to add. 6 plus 0, 0 is 6. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 and 6 gives you 14. Carry the 1. 5 and 1 is 6, and the 1. Now go back to your original problem and count how many decimal places do I have total. I have 1, 2 on this problem, and I have another 1, 2 on that problem. That means I'm going to need a total of 4 decimal places. So we count out 4 decimal places. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your final answer is 16.4636. There's one piece of information that's missing from this worksheet, though. They wanted you to round to 3 decimals. What that means is I'm going to look at my problem. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 decimals, so I draw a little dashed line here because that's where I'm going to round. The 6 is larger than 5, which means it's going to bump the 3 up to a 4. That gives me a final answer of 16.464. Now let's move on to 1.5 times 0.27. Now normally you put the bigger number on top. 1.5 is obviously bigger than 0.27. However, because they're both the same number of terms, it really doesn't matter when multiplication. If we come over to the problem on the right, the 75 is obviously bigger than 3. However, the 3.214 has more numbers than the 75. So when I set this problem up, I'll actually put the 3214 on top of the 75.1 because it's got more numbers. Going back to our littler problem on the left, I'm going to put the 27 on top and the 1.5 on the bottom. Now I'm going to ignore the decimal places right now because I just need to multiply them out. We go ahead and multiply. 5 times 7 is 35. Carry the 3. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 gives you the 13. I'm finished with 5, so I put my placeholder. 1 times 7, 1 times 2. Add them up. Make sure when you do these are nice, pretty in a row. Notice the problem above, everything was in a straight line. This problem, again, everything is in a straight line. 1's column, 10 column, 100's column. Bring down the 5. 7 plus 3 is 10. 0, carry the 1, and that gives me a 4. Now we look at the number of decimals. Our original problem had 2 plus 1, the total of 3 decimals. That means our final answer needs to also have 3 decimals. 1, 2, 3. So our final answer will be 0.405. Now if we go back to the problem on the right, again we had a negative times a positive, so I'm going to put the negative sign there. And we know that our final answer is negative, so it's really good to write the negative sign down for your final answer so you don't forget it later. Then go through the steps. Now count up the number of decimal places. There's 1 and 3, gives us a total of 4 decimal places. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places, and it should go right here. But wait a second, the rules were to only have 3 decimals. So now we need to round our answers again. After 1, 2, 3 decimals, dashed line. The 4 is less than 5, so that means the 1 is not going to be rounded up. Gives us a final answer of 241.371. Moving on to division. To divide decimals, Move the decimal place on both numbers so that the number you are dividing with is a whole number. Then divide like you did in elementary school. So the first problem is a little bit easier. They both only have 1. So I'm going to be dividing by the 5.2. That means on the outside of the house, you're going to have 5.2. On the inside of the house, you're going to have 137.7. But I don't want a decimal point on the outside. I can have it on the inside. I don't want it on the outside. That means I'm going to move the decimal point once to the right. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I move them both one to the right. That gives me 52 on the outside with 1,377 on the inside. Now most of you probably don't know how many times 52 goes into 137 off the top of your head. That's fine. Just look at 5. How many times does 5 go into 13? Well, 5 goes into 13 2 times. So I'm going to try the 2. Then multiply. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 5 is 10. We switch the signs, which means we're subtracting. 7 take away 4 is 3. 3 take away 0 is 3. Bring down the next number, which is a 7. Again, I don't know how many times 52 goes into 337, so I look at the 5 and the 33. How many times does 5 go into 30? Well, 5 goes into 33 6 times, so I'm going to try a 6. 6 times 2 is 12. Carry the 1. 6 times 5 is 30, plus the 1 is 31. Switch the signs. Now we're subtracting. 7 take away 2 is 5. 3 take away 1, 2. 3 take away 3, 0. Now, if we look at the instructions, it says answer each with 1 decimal place and 1 as a mixed number. So as far as the mixed number goes, we're finished. 26 and 25 over 52. That's your mixed number. Now for the decimal point answer, we have to keep going. Put the point, put the 0, bring down the 0, and we ask ourselves, how many times does 5 go into 25? Well, it goes in 5 times. But there's a problem there. If I add in that extra 2, that's going to make my number too big. So I'm going to use 4. Put the decimal point, put a 4 there. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 5 is 20. Again, switch signs. I'm going to have to borrow. The 5 becomes a 4, and that's a 10. 10 take away 8 is 2. 4 take away 0 is 4. Add another 0. Bring it back down. Now you're going to say, wait a second, I thought I only need 1 decimal point. Why are you doing it a second time? Here's the reason. I need to know if that 4 is going to round up or stay the same. The only way I know that is to have 1 more decimal. So we ask ourselves, 5 goes into 42 how many times? 5 goes into 48 times. So I'm going to try an 8. 8 times 2 is 16. Carry the 1. 8 times 5 is 40. With that 1, it gives you 41. Change the sign. I'm going to have to borrow again, so it becomes a 1 and a 10. 10 take away 6 is 4. 1 take away 1 is 0. 4 take away 4 is 0. So I have a remainder of 4, but that's not what I really care about. What I want to do is see if I need to round. So I draw my dashed line there, and I look at the 8. The 8 is larger than 5, so that means the 4 is going to have to round up. That gives me an answer of 26.5. Now let's look at the problem on the right. 17.3 divided by 0.23. In order to divide this out, I'm going to need to move this one 2 spaces. Well, if I move that one 2 spaces, I'm going to have to move this one 2 spaces also. So if we were to set it up, you'd have 0.23 divided by 17.3. The outside has to move 2 spaces. That means the inside is going to have to move 2 spaces. So it's not going to be 173, it's actually going to be 1,730. Now, just so that we don't confuse ourselves, I'm going to erase that leading 0 and those little arrows, So now we're going to ask ourselves, how many times does 23 go into 173? I obviously don't know that off the top of my head, so I'm going to look at the 2 and the 17. How many times does 2 go into 17? Well, it goes in 8 times. But 8 times 3 is a somewhat big number. So instead of you trying an 8, I'm going to try the 7. Now, if you wanted to try the 8, you're actually going to end up with too big of a number and just redo it. That's why we do our math in pencil. 7 times 3 is 21. 1, carry the 2. 7 times 2 is 14, plus the other 2 is 16. Change the sign. 3 take away 1, 2, 7 take away 6, 1, 1 take away 1, nothing. Bring down the next number, which is 0, and you ask yourselves, how many times does 2 go into 12? Well, it obviously goes in 6 times. But because there's a 3 there, we know that 6 isn't going to work. So we're going to move it down 1 and put a 5. So 5 times 3 is 15. Carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Switch the signs. Now, in order to subtract the 0 and the 5, I'm going to have to borrow from the 2. The 2 now becomes a 1, and I have a 10. 10 take away 5 is 5. 1 take away 1 is 0. 1 take away 1 is 0. That gives me 75 with 5 over 23 left over. That would be my mixed answer. However, they also wanted the decimal. So I add my decimals, add my 0, and bring it down. 23 goes into 50. Well, I know that 25 times 2 is 50, so probably 2 times. 2 times 23, 2 times 3 is 6, and 4. Change the signs. I have a 4. Bring down another 0. We bring down the extra 0 so that we can see if we're going to round the 2 up to a 3 or if we're going to leave it at a 2. 23 goes into 40 only one time. 1 times 23 is 23. Subtract it out. I'm going to have to borrow from the 4, which becomes a 3, and the 0 becomes a 10. 10 take away 3 is 7. 3 take away 2 is 1. Now I can stop. I put my dashed line there because that's where I'm going to round, and I look at the 1. The 1 is less than 5, so that means I'm not going to round the 2 up, giving me a final answer of 75.2. We always circle our answers. Sometimes I forget, but go back and circle your answers.